Tom Roach is a scientist. He worked in nuclear energy. He's been very active, I think on the national level as well in environmental causes. And he's from First Congregational Church, Glen Ellen. And that's how I know him because we've gone there some. And he is the head of the green team. They have 35 people on their green team. And it's a very big part of what they do. And he's going to come speak, not just on global warming, but really a focus on immigration, how it's going to affect immigration with some charts and some really interesting pieces about what to expect and maybe how us can discuss some solutions. It's not his main area of expertise, but I can tell he's, as any good scientist, he will have his data and charts for us to look at. It'll be really interesting. He's a very personable, very knowledgeable person.
And he's coming next week.
Next week. And then we have 4 weeks of green team. He'll be next week kicking off green team piece. And there's 3 more. It's in the newsletter. We'll be in the newsletter this week. The speakers, I have to get the descriptions for a couple of the programs.
That's gonna be great. So that was great. Another perspective on things.
Right.
We can talk about saving the environment, but this is, well, climate refugees.
Yeah, could we merge 2 issues?
And how about summer school?
Keep meeting over the summer. Plenty of other comments. So thank you, everybody. We had, Junior found some good things in the paper. I'll pass these around. Let's read them when we can. In the Tribune, a congressperson, Don Beyer from Virginia, basically just on, what DC is thinking. Yes, we're gonna have to regulate AI at some point. But maybe before we go passing any laws, let's find out exactly what it is and what the good and bad possibilities are, what we might need to hear. And something in the New York Times by their tech writer, Brian Chen, which is kind of on the scary side. There's a new Star Trek type device where you're supposed to just pin this little device on your lapel and you can talk to it and it will show you where to go, tell you what you need to know, basically having Google attached to your body at all times. Yes. And
We're all gonna be robots ourselves one day, aren't we?
yeah, halfway there, attached to my hand. So I kind of tell. Chuck Dowding also had another great piece. I don't know if anybody caught this, but just before we do the second half of Nova, one night this week on the PBS NewsHour. Morning, Andrew. Good morning. There was a really interesting and yes, optimistic piece coming from American students. Here's one in particular. I'm going to share the screen here, if I can remember how to do that. There's a 4-minute piece from the PBS NewsHour, and then we'll get back to our Nova. Okay. Well, thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, that's really, did you notice what he said? He shrunk the response cycle
Yeah.
from weeks to hours? And that's really, I think that's a really important thing because the long cycles of communication, you forget most of what you were trying to remember. This is much more efficient. It actually provides almost instantaneous feedback to the students in terms of their writing. So it's a huge increase in terms of, think of the number of cycles now that you can go through revision processes. Before it would take weeks to do that. I've always felt sorry for English professors because can you imagine how do you grade an essay?
So think before you had computers and you had to read everyone's writing.
And you still have to. You still have to. The professors still, even with computers, you still have to read it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really like the part where they said the students need to stand up for their own writing. I thought, wow, what a great thing to teach students. That they can, how empowering that they can be right against a computer or robot.
It's really interesting also to think about the fact that I think I've seen kids don't understand the idea of editing or recorrecting. They think if you correct it, it's a negative aspect. And this is teaching it as a positive thing. This is a way of continuous improvement as you're writing, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, anyway, so I thought it was a really nice, positive way to start the conversation about artificial intelligence. It's easy to slide off into
Today scenario.
It was a great reminder that data, yes, but the human brain is creative and not just a data problem.
Could you, define this cycle they're talking about? I'm lost.
Well, if I write, I'm taking a class in rhetoric and you're the rhetoric teacher. Right? And you give an assignment, write a paragraph for me on, I don't know, James Austen book Pride and Prejudice, chapter 6. So I write my, I don't know, 100 words, paragraph, and I hand it in to you, and you've got 25 students. So you have to take this home. First of all, they have to write it. Right? They have to hand it in to you. You have to take it home. You have to read them. You have to write little things in the margins on here, and you have a little set of symbolisms that says syntax, spelling, punctuation, right? And 2 weeks later, you're done reading this and you give it back to the students. And meanwhile, they spend 2 weeks playing soccer, getting in fights with their friends, having dates with their girlfriends. I don't know, going on vacations with their parents to Aruba. And you hand this thing back and they say, gee, what is this?
What was this about?
What was this about? So now with this program, the student writes a paragraph and 2 minutes later,
I see.
this program responds and says, hey, you guys, I got some ideas for you. You forgot the topic sentence. The topic
Thank
sentence
you.
is supposed to be at the beginning of the paragraph, not at the end. On and on and on. So they'll get this, instead of 2 weeks, they'll get it in 2 minutes.
The other thing is, if you think about all the time then the teacher then has to be involved in creative thinking about what else they want to do with the kids.
Right.
It's really empowering them as well. It's
Yeah,
empowering.
and
So
I thought of that, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, tomorrow, we're gonna write another paragraph. We're gonna, instead of 3 weeks from now, we're gonna write another paragraph.
There used to be a program I could cut and paste, what I'd written in my Apple, word processing program, and put it into, I think it was called Hemingway. And you put it into the Hemingway program, they would give you all the feedback. But it only had so many dimensions that it would help you with. And sometimes it would say, shorten the sentence, shorten the sentence, shorten the sentence. Well, sometimes a complex sentence is, a good deal. Sometimes it's not. So I found it helpful, but it required cutting and pasting, and it didn't have all these dimensions. So I take it these new ones are very much more detailed and much more comprehensive, right?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for Tony, man. I mean, there's even another aspect to this. Since this thing can respond in minutes, you can give the assignment in a class and say, here, write a 5-sentence paragraph about this, right, in the next 20 minutes. So they don't have time to pay $5 to buy a paragraph from India and send it to you as theirs, which a lot of them do now, You give the assignment, they go home and write the paragraph. What do? They spend $5 and get a paragraph from India, who some Indian student wrote this paragraph for them, and they hand it into you, and then you have to figure out whether they really wrote it or not. Now, since they're gonna do this in class, they're not gonna have time. Right. Well, anyway, this is the advantage of this, it's really wonderful, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's great to have such a nice piece like this to show people, I think, also. So,
Thank you.
it's a great thing.
Everyone's more just efficient and productive.
Yeah.
All right, so we're ready. We got about a half an hour of the 60-minute Nova. And just to remind you, I believe we let off, I didn't want to skip ahead, so it might be a minute behind where we left off, but they were using as a great step forward where at one point the game Go, which I guess is quantum more complex than chess, a machine finally beat the Go master from, I think, Korea. And so that's where we left off. So, and then after half an hour, we'll have time to get back into where we were talking. We had some good ideas about using this as a force for good right now.
Well, it's like a large sausage. It's easier to eat the sausage if you slice it into small slivers. So I think you need to take this word artificial intelligence and break it down into 1,000 different ways in which computers are being used today. And what Miles spoke about today was a broad range of use of computer technology. Not necessarily large language models to determine what the next 3 words should be in the sentence that you're typing on the computer. So I think that's would be helpful for you to think about it that way. It's,
Yeah.
this term artificial intelligence is really huge. It contains a lot of other technologies within that term, and we need to parse that out more precisely, I think, when we speak about it.
Great point. Understand what we're thinking about first before we dive into anything. Julia, thanks again, because that Tribune article was just on that point. Before we talk about regulating it, well, what is it? What are we talking about for making decisions? And
Chuck, so all these different countries that want to fight and kill each other, if they all have separate, do they have separate AI things going on?
Yes,
Or, they do.
yes.
So there isn't a universal AI.
Well, there's a universal mathematics. The mathematics don't change between China and Russia and India and the United States. The way in which these neural networks operate are basically mathematical constructs. So those are universal. So it's like many other things in science, you know, the science is science. It doesn't matter whether it's in the North American continent or in Europe. It's basic physics and mathematics, and the engines that operate these various forms of computer manipulation, computer help are based on rigorous mathematics,
Right.
and those are universal. So,
Does
so
that
you're
mean,
right, they are universal in the extent their application though is varied from country to country.
does that eliminate our AI, the USA, from actually spying on another country? Or do we have to guess what they're doing? No, we need to spy on them. Can we ever spy on them?
Well, I think maybe another way of, could I rephrase your question? Can we, if we control artificial intelligence in the United States, right, does that somehow control it throughout the world? And I'd have to say no, because the mathematics are universal.
Right.
So this is one of the problems that you have with regulation is that while you can regulate it within your own universe, you can't regulate science. It's impossible.
The problem is cooperation.
You have to cooperate,
Yeah.
and that's, well, cooperation as you can see from last night's events in the Arabian Peninsula are very challenging.
Yeah, I hate to go dark with this, but the thing that's scared me was if you can create such fake believable events, can you send to North Korea a fake video saying they're under attack and they better send their nuclear weapons, or Russia, nations we don't have good communication systems with, I take it. I mean, there's one thing between setting up the hotline between the two nations. That's now gone compared to something this complex and this high capability to create. I just feel like nuclear, I'm really worried about global warming, but to me, the nuclear issue is always the biggest issue.
we shouldn't forget about it.
I mean, I just think we don't talk about it, maybe because it's so frightening.
For everybody. Yeah, going back
Doesn't it
to
eliminate mutual, what's that phrase?
mutually assured destruction.
That mutual assured destruction, man. Yeah.
We had to use that in the 80s, didn't we? In the Cold War to say, okay, let's have at least enough faith that the Russians don't want the world to die, just like we don't. So they won't use these weapons, just like we aren't going to use these weapons. We hope. But now if somebody can, or,
Yeah.
don't care.
It changes
It's
that.
like a Bond movie or something, because one non-governmental, terrorist
Right.
could. But someone might have made $1 million in the stock market by this one silly little fake photo of an attack on the Pentagon.
Well,
And the stock market dropped that day.
Well, what
So-
about unplugging it? Is that, where's the energy here?
Unplugging it.
Well, I mean, what is the cloud? That's not, I mean, is the origin of it all plugging something into electricity?
The cloud is the storage capability that resides in millions of computers in a building somewhere.
But computers need electricity, right?
Correct, you need electricity to run the cloud. The cloud is not a cloud. That's a
Network.
It's a
You think we
electrical
have,
network.
you think we have the energy resources across the world to support all of this?
Oh, sure. We have nuclear power. If people would
So they can
relax
use- they can
on
use
nuclear power, we have the energy to solve all the world's energy crises right now. We have it right now in our hands. People refuse to use it. So.
But will it create so much heat, as we talked about last time, that we won't be able to function?
Well, we've functioned very well without it. I mean, so in a sense, if you were to reduce its use or stop it where it is right now, I think we can function very well.
No, but I'm saying-
We're efficient enough now. I mean,
We're efficient enough with all the heat that's created by all this energy, by all these computers running? I mean, that's one of the things we talked about last week, is the computers running are using a tremendous amount of electricity and creating a tremendous amount of heat. So,
well, but that's large, but not nearly as large as all the other reasons we create heat. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that help? Does that help? I mean, yeah, it is a lot, but it's still very little compared to use of, generating electricity at coal-fired plants, and put CO2 in the atmosphere.
We could just type in, what's the formula for cold fusion? And let AI figure that out, and now all of a sudden we just discovered that, I mean, eventually, but I guess my question too, Chuck, I don't know if you would have insight into it, but it would be, so what this really has, in my mind, AI is just this unleashed this incredible computational power. So the question is, that computational power was there 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Is it the algorithms that have been developed that have created the large language models and the artificial intelligence applications that are being developed? Because it seems to me that it's just exponentially larger volumes of data that is being processed in split second time relative to what was being done before. And is that driven by just simply these scientists coming up with these algorithms that multiply upon themselves that can actually execute on that?
Well, I think you were right in terms of using the word exponential. The growth has been exponential all along. It's just some arithmetic terms you don't see that. That's why you usually think in arithmetic terms, where the x-axis of a graph is equal to the y-axis, and logarithms don't work that way. But simultaneously, we have been shrinking the size of this computational units. So the time between one calculation and another decreases because they're closer together. We've increased the speed at which the clock speed is also increasing. Right? And we've been working on these models, all three things at the same time. Right? So you can imagine after cycles and cycles and cycles of improvement in all three of these areas, that all of a sudden you can do things.
OpenAI has this breakthrough, and now all of a sudden it works.
It's not really a breakthrough, it's just continual development. It's just in terms of the human understanding of time and energy, it looks like a breakthrough. It's just it's quicker. It's quicker in arithmetic terms, it's not quicker in terms of logarithmic terms. It's been and the logarithmic growth all along. It's just at the beginning of logarithmic growth, you can't sense it, but it's there. So yes, you're absolutely right. It is a result of all of those things that come through. But I think, given, the building in which we've been discussing this, we need to
You know, it's,
move the conversation into, okay, so we've been talking more about solving the problem correctly. Let's talk about, well, what problem should we solve?
part of my concern is the scientific development so far ahead of all development.
We all know of what,
Moral development
yeah.
is so much quicker. I mean, that we've become, so radically individualistic. And we no longer, we have less sense of community connect, that controls our decisions. That concerns me. And I've just listened to a series on The Rest is History, on Luther. Well, Luther kind of started a lot of this, whole individualism. You have to hear the whole series. It was like fascinating and how quickly what individuals thought became important over what large systems like the Catholic dominant church did. All of a sudden it's like, well, whatever you think is okay. And that can really destroy the record, got out of hand, Luther's own day, till it got out of control for him, and you had more radical conclusions from what Luther had concluded, and pretty soon, you know, it's all up to me, I can do whatever I want, do whatever I think matters, you know, and that's what, that ethos of morality is what concerns me as a Christian, because it's not just about what I think. Someone asked someone today on their podcast, said, what's liberty? Liberty is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, know what you're telling me. And I thought, is that the ethic that we now have? And how do we control that kind of madness that we take in consideration the goodness of the whole?
But should we go back to the teachings of Christ to try and parse out what it is we should be focusing on?
Yes.
You know, the golden rule seems to be the simplest, you reduce all this down to, you know, your decisions ought to be based upon your thought of, would I want someone else to do this to me, what I'm doing to them?
Right.
That's
Is
one
that really
consideration, but I think another consideration for all of us is how do we discern what's true with
Yes,
all the
there we are.
artificial intelligence able to create untruths.
It does require a lot of work, and I guess it requires what people generally call triangulation, in that you can't just watch Fox News, and you can't just read the Wall Street Journal, or you can't just watch NPR, you can't just read the New York Times. You gotta look at all of those. And it'd be even better if you were to drill down into the sources of information they use to write the articles.
Somebody fact check everything.
Well, or triangulate it, you know, say, well, okay, someone told me this, you should always ask, well, what is the source of the information that led you to tell me this? And most of the time, they won't be able to tell you.
Right.
Right. So that's I think that's one way to, that's a good point, Jane. What is truth we should use to determine whether what I'm doing is bad or good?
But I would say, I would say, one of the things we're not looking at, I mean, we're looking outward. I think one of the things we need to do is look inward. You know what the truth is. You know within yourself what is really real. You know what's moral. You know what's right. And so I think if we begin to focus that way, you know, really trying to focus that way, is this really right to be having this behavior?
Yeah, I worry about moral training. I wonder how much people, we're educated.
We're making the assumption that we're all moral the same way inside, Carol, and we're not.
We're not.
We're not. I was listening to a marvelous speech at Women's Exchange this week. The woman was Indian. And from the get-go in India, they have 1/4 of the US landmass and 4 times the population. So their idea of having to focus on community and being friends with people is very different from the US and generally Western ideas of individualism. And for them, their morals are very different. They also, in the Hindu world, women, their sense of modesty is very valuable to them. And in other cultures. And yet in the Western world, we have, nude beaches or skimpy bathing suits, et cetera, and we're very comfortable with that. Whose morals are right? And the answer is yes.
Very challenging, very challenging. But I think thank you for bringing that up, JS. But we of course do struggle with this, but that's why we're here in this room, I think, isn't it? To exchange our views with each other in a relatively safe environment where we can be vulnerable and where we can try and reach out to, I guess, the best teachings of our Judeo-Christian heritage. So trying to understand what it would be like.
And think about Jesus. He wasn't like anybody else.
Yeah, at that time. Very good point.
Well, seeing we're dealing with mathematics, could we put guardrail, could we figure out, because maybe that's the key next problem, which is guardrails, based on the common good. Could we, and the problem now is to regulate all countries' AI programs. Is that absolutely pie in the sky?
Yeah, that's a really good thing to bring up is, well, we've spoken about the need for guardrails. We haven't really spoken about how we would go about creating them. And that might be a good set of topics for next year as to how we could create these guardrails. Because that, a number of things come to mind, but
Technically, politically, I mean, how to get Russia and China to do anything? They steal our
Or to
intellectual
double check,
property
yeah.
without even trying to come up with excuses.
Yeah, but they'll do things together, but it's all bad things. Missiles and they can,
And easier for them to hide it.
But there are a number of things we could, finally come to grips with the digital communication age, and we could say that these individual communication platforms like Facebook or TikTok are in fact newspapers. And they have they are a means of communicating, just like a newspaper was. They're no different. It's just a different technology. And we also could go back and institute the fairness doctrine, which says that you cannot send anything out unless you give both sides to it. And that would severely constrain how these technologies operate. And so.
Here, but not.
Well, but that's really important here though, because we vote here.
Yeah, right.
If we can control the information that our people get, so that in fact is already triangulated. And people then vote based upon the information, at least we're voting correctly here for our leaders. That's the most important thing.
Congress is working on that. I mean, they have a whole section, and I read the other day that there's a fellow who's in charge of it, who is, who I think is from Stanford, who's got really tremendous credentials. And another one of the fellows, one of these, other people in Congressman is working on it, went down here at a master's degree because he's really interested in it. So I think that this group in Congress is a very solid group. We're really working on this, trying to set up.
But those might be really good topics for next year.
Lots of good
We
topics.
could develop them.
Thinking about journalism and the First Amendment.
Right.
And sure, the tech, if we want to regulate them as journalists, well, they're just making money by reposting, just copying and pasting everything from the New York Times every day.
Most like they're just using that as classified ads, right?
Totally, yeah.
They're making money from it. you used to have to pay to put a classified ad in, right? And basically advertisers now are paying for them to manipulate us, right?
But the question for me is a difference between the printed stuff and the stuff that you hear on the TV and other online sources. You know, you can, if you don't like what a newspaper is providing, you just cancel your subscription to the thing. But on the radio stuff, or yeah, you just turn it off. But there's a difference because the federal government cannot control what's printed on paper, but it can control what's sent around electronically.
Well, no, it can control whether you have the license to send it. It can't control what you send. Isn't that true? It controls it by licensing a radio station. And
having
but it
standards.
doesn't control what the radio station does.
But you can still have standards, right?
Oh, you're free to lie. We'd have to investigate whether the FCC actually has standards they may have in the past,
They have it in the past.
but with the cancellation of the fairness doctrine, they may not have any now. But these are all great, these are wonderful topics for next year.
Yes.
We need topics for next year.
To add on what Nancy is talking about, general worldwide control, it's even difficult now if like with banks who have extensions in different countries, different federal regulations makes it difficult. What America deems right and acceptable, probably in another country where they have a branch or a service there, is not allowed. Like a typical example here in America, we have gay rights, everything. However, in Ghana, my country, now they are having a big issue of accepting people who are of that class. And they are tending to forget that they are also part of the citizens of the country. And based on their old, some kind of morals they thought was theirs or culture that they believe in, they are making it so such that they don't, right now they are in at a point the government cannot decide because the president has had exposure to the Western world and they know that they can get help from the Western world. But the Western world is also saying, if that's what you are thinking, we are not going to support you. And the few citizens in the country who seem to think they are making it, say, this is what we want you to do. How about the citizens who are like of that class? So what I'm saying is something that if we try to control the whole world, bring it together, it's not gonna work. Because we would accept certain things, some algorithms or certain things that are norms, but when it goes to another country, it won't be acceptable.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's great. That's we can. But as Gene is always quick to tell me, we can control ourselves. That's it.